normative biological function and all the way up. We cannot understand psychological phenomena, if this is the case, without understanding the nature and origin of these emergent normative processes. Dynamics is necessary. It is not enough because we more fundamentally need a process. Thank you.
Questions? Thanks very much. That was very interesting. Totally on board with the process part of it, but something I think went wrong when you moved from recursive self-maintenance to truth values. So I think there seems to be an assumption there that as soon as you've got a system that's doing anticipating, then what it's interested in is getting knowledge rather than acting. So don't you think that rather than the notion of truth value and the move from anticipation to truth value, you could think about anticipation in terms of action or skill or coordination, and that would thereby give you an alternative to this move from anticipating to truth values.
Well, I agree, except for the fact that I don't think it's an alternative at all. It is action that I'm talking about. It's indications of potential action. And they are either true or false, because you can have an indication of potential action that turns out to be not correct. And if you attempt to engage in the action, you can, in principle, not always, but fallibilistically, discover that it was not correct. So I would agree with you about action. That's exactly what I'm talking about, is action. But I would suggest that indications of the possibilities of action are intrinsically truth value bearing, because they can be wrong and they can be correct.
Yeah, but I'm not sure I see why you're making this move from the possibility for action failing, so the possibility for you not coordinating adequately with the possibilities for action, the affordances, based on your skills, to error or correctness or incorrectness. So it seems to me that there's a semantic notion of information or something of that nature that you're sneaking into your account of anticipation. And I don't really see the warrant for that. I think you could just as well describe it in a non-semantic way, thinking of anticipation in terms of skillful engagement or coordination. So I'm wondering exactly why or what's the argument for thinking about anticipation in terms of using these epistemic notions.
Yeah. A legitimate question, but okay, let me try to think of the shortest way to do this. Okay, you have an indication of potential action or potential interaction. It constitutes an implicit predication about the environment. This is an environment in which, if I were to engage in this interaction, it would flow as anticipated. That might be true, that might be false, as an indication, as an implicit predication. So that's one sense. Another sense is, as an implicit predication, it will in fact tend to be true under some environmental circumstances and false under other environmental circumstances. So the predication involves presuppositions about the environment, presuppositions that the environment in fact constitutes sufficient supportive conditions for the indication to be true. All of that can be said without talking about truth value, but it seems pretty obvious that what we classically call truth value is there. So yeah, I would agree with you that you can completely avoid semantic terminology if you want, just like you can completely avoid talking about van der Waals forces in solid objects, but you end up having to spend 100 pages talking about the dynamics that constitute truth value, or you have to spend 100 pages talking about the dynamics that constitute van der Waals forces. It seems to me, and this was in fact an explicit decision on my part, that in changing the focus of semantic notions from correspondence to truth value bearing, I was changing the way we generally think about representing. So should I give up the word or not? Should I change the word? And what I decided was, truth value has always been the stickiest problem. Arguments against representation always end up being arguments against some form of correspondence model. And almost always, the argument is they cannot account for truth value. Now that leads some people to want to give up notions of representing altogether. But another possible suggestion is, look, if you can't get truth value out of correspondence, but you can get truth value out of anticipation, maybe that's the better way to go. So just in terms of how we talk, yeah, we can give up semantic terminology, but if these things are in fact constituted in the actual dynamics, in you and in me, that doesn't make them go away. We just make it a lot harder for us to think about them and talk about it. So that would be my suggestion. They are there, whether we want to say things that way or whether we want to use those kinds of vocabulary or not.
Okay, thank you, Mark. I have several comments and thoughts about your talk, but I think I would like to start from the very last thing you just said now. But it's a more general question about your attitude when you are taught the physics of processes. Because in your talk you exemplify different possible attitudes. At the very beginning you said things such as, well, there are no events, processes all the way down. I mean, you use often this all the way down operator and this normative emergence operator, and it does seem to me that as if when you describe the counterfeit, as the case of self-maintenance and so on, you are describing something that we could agree is an event. And that the same way that now you are trying to compel us to agree that when there are truth values, you should say this is a reality of what's going on. It's not as if with the metaphysical attitude of processes, you seem to be free to adopt different ontological attitudes about the reality of things. Well, these truth values are really there because this is the way these are emerging and computed. But, when we're thinking about events, well, let me know because it feels all the way down. So, is it the case that the metaphysics of processes is still not really telling you how to commit to an ontology of substance or processes? Or is it a question of is it an epistemological issue? You say, well, it's better to conceive of truth values as this real thing that I want to engage with because it's just too difficult to look at all the processes that are involved. So it seems that I saw a little bit of attention in different parts of your talk.
Yeah, I can see your point, but several kinds of responses. First of all, when I talked about there being no events, I said I'm not giving the argument. That was actually a response to the question about causality that the organizers gave us also. I was pointing out that not with an argument, but with the bare claim that there are no events. And if there are no events, then there is no causality in the classical sense of causality. But now let me give you a little feel for why I would want to say that. Yeah, we can talk about the candle flame burning as an event. It's an ambiguity in the way we use the word event. We can use the word event roughly to refer to being in such and such a condition. So the candle flame is in such and such a condition of burning. And in that sense, there is something going on, and it's an event. So it's extended in time. The sense in which there are no events is point events, little space-time points, things like that. And I didn't give an argument for that, for my assertion that there are no such things. But let me wander around the notion a little bit. The argument would take too much time, I think, right now. In effect, what this yields is a relationalism, not an atomism. So there's not an atomism of space-time, there's not an atomism of representations, there's not an atomisms can sort of work heuristically for some things, like the periodic table, but atomism all by themselves and in and of themselves cannot account for their own atoms. And if you'd like to understand the atoms, you've got to get away from the atomism. And that's one of the senses of what's going on here. Johannes Seip's arguments turn on criticisms of the notion of particular within Aristotle. And Aristotelian notions of particular turn out to be logically incoherent. There is no way for Aristotelian particulars to exist. What is going on instead? Well, we're not sure, but one good candidate would be loop quantum gravity. Loop quantum gravity has little loops. So in a certain sense, it's not space-time all the way down because there's a minimal scale of the little loops, but there is a relationalism. You cannot define any of the loops independently. You cannot define them as particulars. You can only define them in their locus, in the interrelationships among all these different loops. So relationalism, rather than atomism, is really the more basic metaphysical stance that this forces you to. And the sense in which there are no events is that there are no events as atoms. So I would argue simply there are no events as atoms, period. But I would also argue that there are anticipations that bear truth out.
You can react more.
Yeah, thank you very much for your wonderful speech. I'm very fascinated, and I would even say that your speech is revolutionary. You have convinced me that as a consequence we have to change completely our ethics. Now I have two questions. One rather of understanding, and the second one of curiosity. And trying to put me in the skin of a politician, not of an American president, but maybe rather of a European, a member of the European Parliament or European Parliament.
It's a sufficient
Yeah,
comment.
and
It's a
now
sufficient comment that you
the
felt.
politicians
Yes,
speak
yes,
on
yes.
urgent problems like migration or like climate change or rise of right-wing parties. Are these ultimately field processes, or rather emergencies, or rather something like meta-recursive constructions? And now my question of curiosity. You have several times announced that you have prepared already something about the change in ethics, and I think we urgently need now this change of ethics. Can you please give a direction, in what direction we have to change the ethics? Because I think this is urgent to do this now. Thank you very much.
Okay, to your first question. I think it's not inaccurate to say that it's quantum fields at all those levels, but I think it's more accurate to say that it's organizations of quantum processes at all those levels. The first way of saying it seems to leave open the possibility that there are little atoms that engage in those processes, but in fact there is no ground of particular atoms that underlies even the candle flame. The candle flame is the process. It isn't any particular set of atoms. And the same thing here. So yeah, there are organizations of emergences that yield further organizations of emergences all the way up into the socio-political realm. And those different layers and kinds of emergences have all kinds of interesting and important properties. So that's the answer to your first question. Yes, it's processed all the way up and all the way down as far and so on. Wow. How to change our notions of ethics, let's see. I can only give you the barest of intuitions of what I'm trying to argue and develop. We have many, many, many layers, and I said earlier, multifarious kinds of emergent normativities all over the place. And one of them is this social level. I didn't say anything about how I think that occurs, but I would argue that the social level is itself an important level of emergence. And there are three co-emergences with the social level. There's social ontology, there's language, and there's personhood. This usage of the word personhood is a little bit idiosyncratic, but not completely. If personhood is itself a social ontology and an emergent social ontology, it is also, so I argue, an emergence that involves its own normativities. And in involving its own normativities, there are ways that to function in the world that are more consistent with those normativities and ways that are less consistent with those normativities. So there are ways to be mistaken in the way you are living your life. There are ways to be mistaken just in the sense that, I can try to open the refrigerator door. But more importantly, there are ways to be mistaken in the way in which I try to live out my emergent reality as a socially ontological person, or an ontologically social person. What this leads to is something akin to an Aristotelian virtue ethics. That character is the fundamental, character in some sense, and there's a model of character in here, is the fundamental locus of ethics, not action. I mean, action is obviously important, but I think the Kantian approaches are just flat wrong in a lot of different ways. And part of the reason is their focus on action. So it yields something like an Aristotelian virtue ethics. It also differs from Aristotle, as you might well imagine. I don't buy into Aristotle's sense of purpose for people. But roughly speaking, this idea of an emergent normative ontology at the level of personhood serves the conceptual function of something like Aristotle's purpose. To extend that notion into the other phenomena of, what happens in terms of social political processes and social political interactions and so on, should be doable in principle, and I've got a lot of thoughts about that, but it has not been well developed yet. I'm still working on it.
Thank you, and a big hand for this talk.